Welcome back to my channel. We're going to be watching a new YouTube channel that I've never seen before. I don't know what to expect from it, but the title was kind of interesting. It says his brain stolen, his body hidden. Anarchist: the tale of Lazarus Auerbuch, I don't know how to pronounce the name, at Ridgelawn Cemetery. So we'll check it out and see what it's about.
Hey gang, I'm at Ridgelawn Cemetery today, right across the street down the road here from Bohemian National. And if you go way, way in the back here, we're looking for the grave of a man named Jerome, who was said to be an anarchist, and we're going to talk about that. And I asked Britton, I said, do you know where this grave is? I know it's at Ridgelawn. He was able to come out here and scout and make things easier for me to find it. And I just took a quick look, and it's way, way, way in the back over here. And I'll tell you, when we get back there, there's going to be some shocking things that we are going to see in this little hidden back section of this Jewish cemetery.
Yeah, you can see
A
how
lot of
old it
pictures
is.
here, a lot of interesting monuments. But if we get to the back,
it's interesting how they do those photographs and they don't fade in the sun.
Not nearly the case. So I will tell you the story as we walk among some of these graves.
That gravestone's
sinking. We head to Jerome's grave. We have the jets, of course, coming through, so I'm going to pause every once in a while if we need to, like right now. So let's talk what anarchy is all about first. I'll give you some context of what we're talking about. Post-antebellum anarchy in Chicago following the Civil War, particularly following the Long Depression, it was called. It was a worldwide price and economic recession. Started in 1873 and running through pretty much, well, the end of the 19th century. There was a rapid expansion of industrial production in the United States going right after that, and Chicago was here a major industrial center.
Okay.
And now there were tens of thousands of Germans and what they called at the time Bohemian immigrants, and they were all employed at about $1.50 a day.
Oh my God, $1.50
right
a day
here in the city.
It's amazing.
And a lot of them lived not far from here. They worked an average of 60 hours a week, a normal week, 6 days work week. And, it was like slave labor.
Yeah, exactly.
And the city became the center for many attempts to organize labor's demands, the unions, for better work.
Yeah, and just know, I mean, I'm sure most people do, but a 40-hour work week and overtime, if you work over 40 hours, that all came from the unions. So really, we need to support the unions, and I'm sure some of them are not perfect, but that's the reason they exist. It's been needed for a long time.
Working conditions.
These are amazing tombstones.
Which they did deserve.
Exactly.
And the employers, of course, responded with anti-union measures.
Of course.
We know about the blacklisting of union members and lockouts, strike breakers, employing spies, thugs, and private security forces. And that really just made things worse.
I'm sure.
The tensions would obviously start to get out of control. And the businesses were supported by the newspapers at the time, who were opposed to labor and immigrant press.
I think to some extent they still are.
What they were saying. So socialist and anarchist organizations started to sprout up and become active. And that's where the term the Chicago anarchist movement, who here they operated actually a militant, revolutionary type of force, and they were armed. And they were equipped with explosives. Now, you may have heard of the Haymarket riot, which happened here. And that's really where everything kind of came to a crescendo, where one of the anarchists threw a bomb killed people, policemen, and it just turned. It was called a riot, but it was like a war, and a lot of people were injured, and a lot of people were killed, and it was a pretty big deal here. In fact, if you go to Montrose Cemetery, you can see. Forest Home Cemetery. These are stuck. These are fastened shut. You can see the monument. It's quite an amazing monument. And there's, I believe, I don't think it's a cenotaph. I think it's the actual grave of Emma Goldman, who was a leading national anarchist proponent, if you will. So that's a little bit of background on the Haymarket thing. And, this place being the epicenter for a lot of that work. Now, the man we're looking for, Lazarus Auerbuch, he was born in 1889. He was born in what was called then the Russian Empire, the present-day capital of the Republic of Moldova, a place called Kishinev. He and his older sister, Olga, they had survived this I don't know if it's a purge or riot. It was called the Kishinev pogrom, and it was basically an anti-Jewish riot. And of course, at the time, and it seems like ever since history, the Jews have always been fighting the racist beliefs in people, and
True.
always were persecuted. So it's no different. So Lazarus actually followed his sister here to Chicago. He emigrated a year after her. He came here in late 1907. They lived in a small apartment here.
So this channel is called Faces of the Forgotten. I think that's why he's spending so much time zeroing in on these photographs.
Of course, all that's changed now. Lazarus worked as an egg packer on South Water Street in Chicago, and back in the day, South Water Street, boy, that was the area where you had meat packing and all kinds of food related. Even today, you have a lot of that going on. And, well, the big story early in the morning on Monday, March 2nd, 1908, Lazarus visited the home of the Chicago Police Department, the chief of police, a guy named George Shippey. And that's another story. We'll visit his grave someday. And, one version said that he entered the residence at 9 a.m. and all of a sudden shots were fired and he was killed. Now, the story that I'm going to tell you here has two sides. Of course, there's always two sides of the story depending on, the interest. But in my opinion, he may have been murdered when you hear the aftermath that I tell you. This is a very interesting story. So, of course, the one side, the popular side, is that he got there at 9 a.m. And according to Police Chief Shippey, this was Lazarus's fourth visit in 2 days, making him, quote unquote, a suspicious figure. When he encountered the man, Shippey said, was in the entryway of his house. He grabbed Lazarus by the arms. He was attempting to disable him. And it said that Lazarus drew a knife and he wounded Shippey in the arm.
Little girl.
And then it is said that Lazarus grabbed pulled out a revolver and fired. And it is said that he struck Shippey's son, Harry, as he entered from the upstairs, he was coming down to investigate all the noise. Now, Shippy's driver and bodyguard, a guy named James Foley, had entered the house, and he also attempted to restrain Lazarus. And it said that Lazarus shot Foley in the hand before both Foley and Shippy just opened up on him and shot him to death. And of course, the newspapers reported that Lazarus, they said he was an anarchist and wanted to assassinate Shippy because Shippy had shut down an anarchist demonstration shortly before.
It's so weird they used to photograph dead people like that.
So as I was saying from the beginning, there would be two sides to this story.
I'm sure.
And now the Jewish contingent was saying, no, it didn't happen that way. And the Jewish press started getting involved. They said, no, he didn't have anything in his pocket. He just had a piece of paper. He was there trying to get the police chief to sign this piece of paper that said, it was really a testament of good character so that he could seek work outside of Chicago. And you have to wonder if maybe he reached in his pocket for the paper and Police Chief Shippy maybe thought he had a gun. Or
But wouldn't he have knocked on the door?
Who knows?
And then they would have just said,
But
no, we don't want to deal with you.
In an interview,
What was he doing
said,
in the house?
Lazarus could not even afford a gun. He didn't even know how to use one. Well, after the killing, the Chicago police initiated a search for a curly-haired man, someone they say saw with Lazarus before the shooting, hanging out. So they rounded up suspected anarchists all over, and those that they suspected, who were, of course, mostly Eastern European immigrants, they targeted. And soon thereafter, there was a federal law made right after Lazarus's death, allowing authorities to deport recent immigrants for involvement with anarchism or other misbehavior. 2 days after the shooting, the famous anarchist that I was referring to, Emma Goldman, was arriving in Chicago, actually. But the public outrage and negative press coverage that was going on, and then the harassment by police, had forced her to cancel her planned address. Following Auerbuch's death, Olga, his sister, was detained by police and interrogated for over 3 days straight. And they didn't even tell her that he was dead. She was confronted with his body damaged from gunfire and roughed up by the angry policeman. And in the days that followed, she struggled to convince the police that Lazarus was not an anarchist. Well, authorities buried his body, not sure where, they say in a potter's field somewhere. And when he was to be exhumed and given his Jewish burial, his body was missing.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And after 3 days, with major support from community members, his body was recovered, but his brain had been removed.
Wow.
They say possibly in an attempt to study the brain of an anarchist. Well, after a few more days of inquiring, his brain was finally recovered.
Wow.
And it is here that Lazarus was properly buried. And as I stand back here close to his grave, I'm kind of taken aback by what I'm seeing. And I started to see the signs of this just as I started approaching this area, but there are tombstones just in piles here.
Yeah.
You have to wonder what's going on. Look at this over here.
Yeah.
Are these forgotten souls? They're people, they're somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
But why would they be
What
here
is going on? Yeah.
in a pile?
Hmm.
In a shovel here?
Hmm.
I don't know,
Maybe they're
guys.
going to do some yard work and then replace them.
Let's do some investigation. But these are real people with real names, like Samuel Samuels, 1849 to 1892. And, this is probably a grave. That's probably where he's buried. But all of these other ones here,
Yeah, they're just piled
these
up.
are all just stacked up. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is, but there has to be a reason for this.
Looks like a second pile.
Why? Look at this. We've got porcelain images. Look at this. Holy cow. Dora Berman. That's a real person, guys, and her stone is just. Where's she buried, I asked?
1947.
Where is she buried?
Yeah.
Look at this. Here's another one. Louis Leibovitz. Louis Leibovitz. Passed in 1942.
I wonder if they have family, that still comes to visit.
Maybe Deb and Trish, we can do a little digging. Here's Cohen. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. There has to be a reason for this. Maybe this is just temporary.
That's what I'm
and
thinking.
They're repairing. There has to be a reason for this. They can't just be dumped here. I don't want to go down that road, but let's investigate. There's another one over here. They don't appear to be trashed, broken, thrown. There must be something wherever.
Oh, how about that? They move them out for new burials.
Okay, that's what I'm gonna say.
Good question.
Guys.
To where?
But when I first saw this, I was like,
and do they remove the bodies, or they just stack them?
Lazarus. He went by Jerome formally, but they say mostly it was Lazarus. So let's walk over here. And I'm guessing this is where he's buried. But yeah, because all the other stones are laying down. So let me tell you about the final aftermath as we stand here. So Olga returned to Ukraine in the Russian Empire, as it said back then, that was called. And of course, many Jews in that region, her region, died in Nazi death camps, World War II. But Olga's name was never listed among the dead, so it's a mystery.
No, 1908. I thought they said 1968.
George Shippey never returned to work. This is where it gets very interesting. Right after this incident, he could not go back to work. It is said that after the shooting, he developed irrational tendencies, quote unquote, and was prescribed arrest.
Maybe he had him before the shooting.
And he had to resign his post. And as the years went by, Shippey grew violent and guards were assigned. They had to be assigned to his home to protect his family from him.
Wow.
In February 1913, he was taken from his home and deposited to a mental hospital in Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah,
and on
that's what they did.
April 13th of 1913, it is there where he died. And it is said probably from the result of late-stage syphilis. So we don't know. There's two sides to this story, and I ask, what do you guys think? I'm kind of in the middle, but I might be thinking that this man was murdered by this crazy police chief. When you look at the whole story and the context of everything, but we'll probably never know. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. Anyway, rest in peace, Lazarus Jerome.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I mean, if it happened so suddenly and he started becoming violent, he may have already been on that path even before he got shot. And so he may have murdered this young man. But the question is, if he was just there trying to get him to sign this paper, it would seem to me that he would just go up to the front door, knock on the door, and either get entrance or not. So that is, a he said, she said kind of thing, because it's two very different stories. But either way, it sounds tragic and horrible. And then the fact that the police officer wound up in the insane asylum. We know what the insane asylums were like back then. They weren't good. So it's just a ugly, unpleasant story. And who knows what's going on in that cemetery? Because where do they move the bodies to? And are they moving the bodies, or do they just leave them and stack new bodies on top of them, but they lose their tombstone? It's kind of strange. So it would be interesting to know more about that. And if you do know anything about it, let us know. Well, anyway, this was, like I said, Faces of the Forgotten is the name of the channel. I've never seen them before. Um, it's important to remember people, and every once in a while, you know, visit these sites and visit the stories. It's our history, so it's important. All right. Well, I thank you for coming to visit the channel. I hope you enjoyed the show. I found it interesting. Hope you did too. Thank you. Have a good day.